Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. We will be discussing the opportunities for agricultural and rural Argentina. For me, it is a true pleasure to be here. Thank you, Aapresid, for allowing me to moderate this roundtable, because it is a very important exchange to think about the future of our country. We will think and discuss the future of Argentina and of agriculture and the agriculture in the territories of the province. Specialists in geography and rurality like to call it that way. We have 4 colleagues today with different approaches and an international perspective. We have also a view from the Senate of Argentina and of organizations such as Aapresid and also public policies. And you know very well that Argentina has many opportunities, more than many countries in the world, because of its wealth, its extension and surface area, as well as its diversity. However, we still have structural problems in the agricultural sector and rural problems that are impossible at this point in the country. So this roundtable will address the opportunities that we have and the chances we have to turn this situation around. Like I said, we have a panel with 4 representatives of the sector. First of all, I would like to thank Marcelo Torres for his presence. He is the president of Aapresid. He's an agricultural farmer. And thank you, Marcelo. Thank you for allowing us to have this discussion. We have Manuel Chiappe, Undersecretary of Agriculture of Argentina. Thank you very much, Manuel, for sharing your experience as a public official and as a farmer. Francisco Paoltroni is also joining us. He is a senator, but is also a producer and a businessman, a senator for Formosa. But he is also a senator in representation of the agricultural sector. And Carlos Cherniak, he is a diplomat, and he has been a representative for Argentina in the World Food Program, FAO, and other organizations. Thank you very much for sharing your experience internationally about agriculture. To be concrete, we will now give the floor to each of the speakers to have a discussion on the future and opportunities of Argentina. All of this surrounding 3 main questions. The first one is very general. How do you see Argentina in this new geopolitical context at the Latin American and international levels? And the second question has to do with how you see agriculture in this new global context. How do you see agriculture in Argentina in this new geopolitical international context? And more to the point, what should be the agenda of public organizations of the productive world regarding the main challenges of Argentina for the future in terms of agricultural development and rural development? So without further ado, and in order to move forward, I will give the floor to Marcelo Torres. I thank him once again for the opportunity to share these ideas. Marcelo, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Marcelo. This is a wonderful panel, really. Thank you very much for being part of Aapresid. And thank you for allowing us to have these exchanges. As we were saying yesterday, Argentina has a series of recurring problems in the short term, but we must consider as well the world that is coming and the changes that are appearing and how to insert ourselves in that reality. With what is happening lately in all the war conflicts and the tensions, and especially the positions that you see in climate change summits, we are very far from the planetary phase where we would be supposed to be to solve the different problems. We have problems that are of global reach, and that we should have evolved as a humanity to tackle them globally. We have global challenges that we need to respond to with global responses, and the countries should be collaborating in learning more quickly and in different aspects of agricultural production and being more collaborative. This is the phase where we should be, but with what is happening in the world, we are still in a struggle. Countries just protecting their small square meters and culture, and we still haven't entered a planetary phase that is discussed in climate change summits. But the planet must produce 40% more food by 2050. And they must also be a source for energy, biofuels, renewable energies. And it will not be easy to replace fossil fuels, but we will increase and start increasing the blends and even generating electrical energy. Agriculture will have to produce biomass and grains for this. But to do this, we must decouple this from the environmental impact, because regardless of whether we have a discussion about climate change or not, and that discussion should always be science-based. But beyond that, there is no doubt that the trend is that consumers have become more and more interested in knowing the environmental impact of what they consume. And so that will be a strong demand placed on us, and that trend is irreversible. So if we are not part of those conversations, Carlos was saying it yesterday, we are on the menu. Yes, if we don't have these conversations and we cannot show solidly that our no-till farming, our pasture livestock that is mostly pasture-based, they have very good environmental indicators, but we have to prove that. We have to show it. A researcher from Michigan, Bruno Basso, he's from Napoli, and he said, you have a really, you may have a luxury article like an Italian purse, but you're trying to sell it on the street. So people will not believe that it's original if you had it in a store with all the proper credentials and all that. So he made that comparison. So I think that this is a very good debate. Some people don't want anything to do with traceability, etc. But I think that we're already doing things right in Argentina with no-till farming, with pasture-based livestock production. But I think we should brag more about that. I mean, we should stand more proud and try to be free of those things in this transition. And when you go to these summits, you see conversations about service crops, about climate summits. Before COVID, it seemed that organic agriculture was a global solution. But when Russia invaded Ukraine and it showed the fragility of the balance of supply and demand of food and energy, we realized that we have to move towards science-based agriculture. And when we talk about regenerative agriculture, there are different views. Supposedly, it's an agriculture that regenerates based on objectives and considering what practices we use to regenerate. But going back to that, we have a good agricultural production and we have good indicators. But first, we have to build a regional message. Agree with Paraguay, with Brazil, with Uruguay. And we're trying to do that because we have similar systems. So we must have a regional strategy. So what I was telling you about the pandemic and how the vaccine was a way to leave the pandemic behind, and with the invasion of Russia on Ukraine, the discussion moved towards a more scientific and rational place. And that's where we have a chance. When there's more scientific evidence involved, the discussion becomes easier. because there are still a lot of people that are anti-science, that have their beliefs, and Europe sets the agenda, and that's the case there as well. So we have to carry out these high-level discussions. People know this data, so I'm not going to make reference to it, but with grains, we have 30% of the global market share in grains, and 65% for the region of the global market. With meat or animal protein, 30%, and only chicken more than 35%. And everything that I was saying before is true. Another main attribute is the involvement of farmers in innovation processes. At the COP, right now, we are hearing these conversations, but in the hallways, when we have public officials and academics, farmers still feel very distant from all this. And you will probably have seen in Europe where they're pointing fingers at the culprits, but farmers do not feel involved in these transitions. Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay, they also have a great strength there. So I would say that that's where the opportunities are. You probably saw many young people. We still have many young people interested in food production, fiber, energies, and we don't see that so much in the world. So I think young people still feel attracted to all this because there's technology. There are networks that we've naturalized, contractors interacting with advisors, with producers, young people who are advisors, but they're already planting, they already have a small plot of land. So having young people in agriculture is a really big asset for the region. In this network, we have to extend the reach to the industry and build a reliable channel between consumer and producer. We need to decodify this message. If we talk about carbon footprint, consumers may not be looking at this, but regenerative agriculture has to be considered. From the industry to the producer, we must use hard parameters like carbon footprint. And for consumers, for them to say that what they produce or what they consume comes from regenerative models.
Latinoamérica tiene una oportunidad.
Latin America has an opportunity there. And to give an example, we're working on the carbon network, to see how we can capture carbon in the country, and what is the current state, what are the practices that allow us to better capture carbon. And if we design the productive landscape, we have to work on the biome, but by helping biodiversity and guaranteeing a good design. Marcelo, you like territorial order and a good landscape design to ensure the duration of that biodiversity. And developing value chains, we must be part of the global discussion. So I think it was a little long as a response, but that would be my first intervention. Just a discussion to have with you. Thank you, Marcelo. You've mentioned many key concepts. A young agricultural sector is essential, and in comparison to what is happening in the global north. Regional convergence, the need to relate to Paraguay, to Brazil, in Latin America in general. Science and innovation, and the need to build innovation ecosystems that are more integrated, and where Aapresid has been the leader in Argentina and the leadership to think about the future. So thank you, Marcelo, and we give the floor now to Manuel for you to move forward. Good morning, everyone. The idea is to give a mixed view about the agricultural producer, but also from the point of view of a public official. That is quite a challenge that we've taken on some time back. and to think about the questions in terms of challenges facing Argentina. We have many issues. Disruption has become the norm and not the exception. We've seen the pandemic, we've seen political tensions, tariff wars that can create significant distortions in the price of commodities. We have wars, we have extreme weather events, such as the recent floods in the south of Brazil because of the excess of rains. All of those disruptions sort of give shape to the insertion of the activity of Argentina in the world. The other issue is regulations and requirements. The most recent one is the deforestation regulation of the European Union. We understand that that will become more recurrent and the requirements will increase. Many of us have been concerned about the European Union regulations in the last months, but this has been happening for 2 years. So I think it's a lesson to learn for all of us. Understanding that we need to work on topics much more in advance and not wait for the last minute to ask for extensions or make formal requests, and of course adapt to be able to compete and to continue supplying the markets that were so hard for us to secure. The other challenge is immediacy. Today there is a conflict and there is a flood or there is a war or there is a pandemic, and in less than 1 week, our life changes completely, and everybody finds out, and everybody knows what is happening. So that, in addition to the real effects of that disruption, I think it creates a dynamism in the decision that has become imperative for each of our roles as public officials and as representatives of the governments. And this demands a greater level of alert from all of us. And if we see the glass half full, we are in a region of peace. Argentina is in an area with climate and productive conditions that are absolutely privileged, and I think I don't need to clarify this, despite the fact that in Entre Rios we have had 3 years of drought. We understand that this has become a competitive advantage that we need to strengthen, and it depends a lot on the internal order that we have as a country. The government is making an enormous, tremendous effort to organize the macroeconomy, which is the basis to project, to move forward, to design everything that we are thinking into the future. But if we do not have a solid basis and an economic structure in the country, all the efforts will dilute and disappear.
Les diría que el tema ese es central. Duele, lleva tiempo, necesita de paciencia, pero es necesario, porque si no lo solucionamos de una vez por todas, vamos a seguir como venimos hace muchos años patinando en el barro. Y la buena noticia es que el equipo económico de este gobierno tiene la decisión firme de poder avanzar en esa línea, de poder solucionar los problemas de fondo y poder tomarse el tiempo necesario para poder arreglar los cimientos del edificio para poder crecer todo lo que sea necesario. Dentro también de las oportunidades que tenemos es, bueno, obviamente un crecimiento de población que necesita lo que nosotros producimos, alimentos, fibras, energías de calidad y en cantidad. El desafío es estar a la altura de esa demanda. Lo estamos en la cantidad y en la calidad, pero no en la seguridad de la provisión, ¿no? Tenemos que ser confiables, tenemos que ser un país que provea los alimentos a un mundo que los necesita de manera constante en el tiempo y no con disrupciones como lo hemos tenido en el pasado, ¿no? Y creo que ahí hay algo muy importante, que es una decisión de gobierno que salió en el decreto 70, en el famoso DNU, que es el artículo, lo voy a leer para no equivocarme, pero es el artículo 100.
It's Article 142, where the executive power will not be able to establish restriction to exports. I think relating this to the role of agriculture in all of this, this is a key to generate trust in our consumers, that we are not going to make market interventions, or that officer of a second level or third level decide to close an export market overnight. And a market that we found it hard to negotiate and to work on those on that wonderful work carried out by the Foreign Office and our delegates abroad and the Secretary of Agriculture to try and get those markets. As to the role of agriculture and to speed up things, I think that we have to have the early capacity to identify those threats and opportunities, or those barriers, those gaps, so as to make the most of those markets. A good example of that is the recent case of the opening of the export market of swine to Uruguay. Unfortunately, due to a weather situation, a climate situation between Brazil and Uruguay, they needed swine provider, and we were able to provide to deliver in less than a month, thanks to the Secretary of Agriculture and Foreign Office. Tools for a right of the adequate traceability of products. The world today requires from us information on the goods, services that we provide, and their traceability certification is key. And going back to the European Union message, let's not wait until they demand it from us to be able to start doing it. I think that we have to start earlier on, and there's a network work and private-public interaction that is paramount. The other point, and going more into the agenda of public bodies, as I was saying, in the Article 172 of the decree, the idea is to open to the world and to connect with the international markets. That's key. That's the core of our government. It's the main way we can grow, make our economy grow in a market that is more deflated, colder today. I mean, the local market with limited capacity for growth. The opportunity is abroad then. So, of course, to eliminate all restrictions to exports, open new markets, to work not only on the commercial and the sanitary aspect, but on the political aspect we have to work on. We have to work on those three focuses so as to ensure the opening of more sophisticated markets, markets that can pay more for our goods and services, and that goes hand in hand to placing value on the attributes of our exports. As Marcelo was saying, the question of that purse, the high-end purse, well, it's important to place the good value our goods and services deserve, the nutritional attributes of our food. All that will make a difference when it's time to start negotiations, and that should be shown with metrics, traceability, and objective tools that can depict that in the markets. And lastly, I think that coordination is key. When the state and private stakeholders work together, things move faster at national, regional, provincial level. But also, I think that a very good example is the statement of the Agricultural Council of the South, where the ministers of Chile, Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, Bolivia, and Uruguay agreed on a common front as to the regulations of the European Union. Those signs of sticking together and presenting a single position is a very strong position. Besides having a proposal and requesting for a delay in the objectives to be met, I think that makes us stronger. Well, thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you, Manuel. And I would like to recover some very strong ideas that you have proposed to debate later on. First, the importance of global perspective of Argentina and the world, a more strategic perspective of the role Argentina has in the future. And in that sense, the need to put our house in order and to generate new tools for management, for agricultural policies management, and a clearer and a stronger private-public relation. Thank you so much for these ideas you contribute to the debate. We give the floor now to Francisco Paoltroni, National Senator for the province of Formosa. Francisco, you have 15 minutes. Good morning. First and foremost, I would like to tell you two stories. One was the first related to no-till, the first no-till and the first pesticide application. I was born in a chacra, in a farm, and I did primary school on horseback, and I started secondary school in another city, in Saladillo, and I started bumping into all the technology of the 90s. And of course, I had the pleasure of meeting people such as Oscar Alvarado in those days. And I came across the situation of my dad to tell him, to share with him what no-till was. My dad would be 90 today, and he had started plowing on horseback. He saw the first tractor. When he saw the first John Deere, there was the biggest revolution he had ever imagined. And I came back from school saying we should not plow anymore and we should only pass seeder. It was a huge challenge. It was impossible because it's not the tools we have today. Today you show this on a video or with your cell phone. But the best way possible was the Chakra magazine, and I started finding my way to convince my dad to have the first 13 hectares of no-till. Unfortunately, my dad died. He was not able to see the first harvest, and when in his dying bed, I was told him about this first harvest. There was a product called Roundup that killed the Gramon. He has been combating for 60 years. I showed it with this bug, and you have to cut them off. That would be very clean to be the second fortnight of February, and 8 liters of glyphosate. My dad thought the field was no good. The next day everything was white, and it was shocking. And why do I say this? Because we are in a change of era that is focusing on two main factors: the change of generation and the technological advances. That's why change is irreversible. And in the context we are, our country is a big potential winner. Now, to put my message in order, I think that there's no doubt that the first challenge all Argentines have is to put our economy in order. As Manuel said, we have naturalized to live with this economic terrorism. We are one of the few countries in the world to suffer these permanent mistakes we undergo. So we have naturalized living with inflation, with the lack of control, with interventionism from the state. And today, after 20 years of the highest years of growth, Uruguay has 10% of poverty, Chile has 8% poverty. And no offense, but they were very small countries compared to Argentina in the 1960s. So there's no doubt that the first thing is economy, to have a good currency, to have credit that can help us develop and grow economically speaking, that is so expected by the by the Argentine people. The second big challenge is infrastructure. We talk about how to increase productivity, but we are not posing anything new. How are we going to transport those 6 million tons of grains, those 60 million tons that are added in commodities that were not even in the map to produce copper, lithium, that today is a reality? And so it's starting to happening. So we are preparing a field without gates. So the big challenge of Argentina is to start developing cargo railroads. It's the only way that is more competitive in the world to transport goods. Okay, we can say that it's not profitable for passengers. But in the case of cargo, this is important. It's important to generate competitiveness possibilities in the interior of the deep of our provinces. The only possibility is through the railroad. There's an international treaty called Ferrocarriles Sudamericanos, South American Railways. That is to say, the southern integration of all southern countries to exit to the Pacific Asian ports, because 80% of what's the heart of South America, what is produced, the natural destination is Asia Pacific. The world has changed. The place of production and the place of production have changed, and that demands from us to think of different roads. And there, the state has to be present. That's why I'm liberal, but a developer. But I'm not saying that the state has to fund the construction of those railroads, but we have to define as a state where we are going at. We have to sign that international treaty to have investment. And so we are going to set in motion those 2 million hectares that you have in Formosa. In Formosa, they say we cultivated 100,000 hectares. So I'm always saying that there's nothing unfairer than the poverty of Argentina, because if you think of the richness and the wealth in our country, you will say, it depends on us. Infrastructure is key, and the big tool is railroads, cargo railroads. To think that you have 100 million tons and 60 million of mining commodities is impossible. Triple contamination, triple number of trucks, triple number of deaths on the roads, a horrible panorama. So this is a big challenge we have ahead. Regarding companies, the other big challenge, many of the companies have to evolve with time or diversify. That's the way to go, undoubtedly. In the case of Formosa, the Formosa with the fewest number of companies, 3 times less than Chaco and 10 times less than the city of Buenos Aires, of course. But we have to go towards an evolution. And of course, a way of diversifying or founding new companies are infinite possibilities. As I said, India has the 4th biggest railroad network in the world. In November last year, they completed their 100% electrical railways. We are very far from that objective. But the ambassador told me we have 100 diesel locomotives to spare. Oh, that's good news, I told the ambassador. But that's all the opportunities we have so far. But what am I saying about the India? Because the future of railroads that we have to set in motion in South America should be done with renewable energies. And we have all the possibilities of carrying this out. Wind power, biomass, all the opportunities we can think of are here in our country. But I would like to make this line or to draw this line of challenges. We talk about economy, infrastructure and logistics, the evolution we should companies should have in those different areas, the different supply chains they are part of, the supply chain of renewable energies. The fourth point is teamwork. Who should we partner with? I cannot explain any businessman what a team means, but we have to take this concept to the state, to the municipalities, to the houses of representatives, the House of Senators. The country should be filled with decision makers, with makers, in the places where decisions are taken. Otherwise, there's no possible change. We are going to be confined, thinking how we can make progress with 50 grams per day when people are going 100-fold more than ourselves. You're not going to become a champion if you live messy, seated at the bench. The people who we have to emulate, those who knew how to keep a good portfolio of customers, manage good teams, those are the ones who have kicked the goals. This is our football team are the survivors, and we need those survivors to reach the decision-making positions, because without a good team, this is impossible. And I think many feel that it's time we took that necessary step forward via the municipality or in favor of the municipalities and the provinces and the country. I don't know if I still have time. There is a quote that I think applies permanently. If we continue trying always the same, we're not going to have different results. This applies also to our country and to leadership. And if we want to become this powerful Argentina we all want to become, this is the key. And so a different Argentina is impossible with the same people we know so far. Thank you, Francisco, so much. Very clear ideas we have here, opportunities at global level, many production opportunities, but the need for new infrastructure to be able to harness all those opportunities, the need to diversify and make our companies more complex, and the need for new teams and new leaderships to face that future. Thank you so much, Francisco. Carlos Cherniak, you'll have the floor, but with an additional reflection, please, from an international perspective. What can we expect from the future?
¿Se escucha?
First of all, thank you very much, Marcelo, for having invited me, especially the international team led by Mailen and the guys, because you're really doing impressive work. Anyone who comes into this Congress, I think it's my third or my fourth, I'm truly impressed, pleasantly impressed, because of the enormous efforts that have been made. Thank you, Marcelo, for that. Thank you for the honor of sharing this panel with such important figures who have such a great capacity to play this game, and it's a pleasure to hear them. I will propose a different perspective. It may have been important to say this at the beginning, but I will say them now at the end and maybe connect them with some of the things that were mentioned. I want to clarify that a week ago I stopped being the permanent representative before the FAO and the World Food Program. So anything that I say is my own saying as a person and not in representation of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Without a doubt, we are experiencing a profound change that has been a long time in the making internationally. We are facing a reconfiguration of order and world power. Some people have qualified this moment as a transition or as an interregnum. I prefer to subscribe to the idea that we are in a context of non-hegemonic order. And like I said at the beginning, that has been a long time in the making. So that creates a certain feeling of disorder or confusion at a worldwide level. To affirm that we are living in a non-hegemonic order means that no state or coalition of states is exercising a universal and full hegemony. There is no bipolar order. And we are not seeing that this will be the case in the short term or in the near future. So after 300 years, the 18th century, 19th century, and 20th century of domination of the West, where certain values, institutions, rules, preferences, and interests were universalized, we are now facing what some experts consider the dawn of the domination of the West and the end of the order of the post-Cold War. The United States and China are the only powers that have the wide range of power attributes. In the future, other players may rise, but this would reinforce the idea of no hegemony of any state in particular. Not even regionally, the United States is exercising its power hegemonically over Latin America and the Caribbean, and neither does China on the Asian continent. Therefore, part of the global uncertainty is the fact that we are heading towards a post-Western world. And more than the dawn of the West, because it's not really the decadence of the West, we are talking about displacement of the gravitational center outside of the West. And this involves, according to certain academics, that the main training centers would be first screening between two opposing norths that are represented by the United States and the non-geographical West, and China together with Russia, Iran, North Korea, Iran, Cuba, and Venezuela. And this North 1 and North 2 made up of the other part, which would be called by certain people a global South, but that is highly heterogeneous in terms of the power configuration, political regimes, social and economic models, values, and cultures. The relationship between the two Norths is of rivalry, but also of cooperation in certain moments. We've seen it in certain moments related to financial crisis or climate change, but we cannot rule out the risk of a military confrontation in the future. The relationship between the two Norths with the South, or with the so-called global South, is complex and has different levels of dependency, particularly in Latin America, whereas the United States is in a phase of relative decline and with the need to define what will be its positive or more positive involvement in the region. On the other hand, we are seeing a reality and a rising power with many power resources, both economically and with influence capacity, and I'm talking about China, but also with greater availability to provide tangible goods to a region that is desiring technological innovation. The United States, therefore, will need to make a choice whether they expand more resources in this region in a context that is undoubtedly challenging. The triangle, Latin America, China, the United States, places South America in a very unprecedented situation with a dual dependency of two strategic competitors with parity of power and a situation that has never existed in the past and never existed during the Cold War with the Europe of back then. Therefore, this is my first message. I'm not giving my opinion. I am just saying how this global transition is happening worldwide. My first message is that we will need to be very careful in reading the competition process between the two Norths to analyze the level of that possible confrontation that could take place to decide or make the best decisions in our own foreign policy, trying to assess the opportunities that are presenting for Argentina and that this global North that we are not part of. But Chile and Mexico, who have been part of the free trade agreement with the United States for years, are expanding their negotiations with China to obtain more investments to extract strategic minerals in the case of Chile and increase automotive production in the case of Mexico. This shows the broad range of possibilities of any bilateral interaction where the triangular dynamics are not involved. This, in general, this dynamic emerges when sensitive topics appear, such as strategic matters, or in the case of China, the case of Taiwan. So I would like to conclude this first point regarding the geopolitical context by expressing that a non-hegemonic international order should expand the autonomy capacity of the global South and of countries such as Argentina. This because this non-hegemonic order in general does not create rigid blocks like in the Cold War, and that happens mainly because of the dissemination of power and global wealth. It has become clear in the past years that our region, that is Latin America, has lost its gravitas in international conflicts and in terms of coordination because of intra-regional crisis and socio-political crisis in our countries. However, with a process that started in 2007 with the global rise in the price of food, plus the consequences of the Arab Spring in 2011, originated by the lack of a key input in the diet of this population, such as wheat, and in the last few years with the pandemic and the Russian invasion on the Ukraine, we have seen the geopolitics of food emerge. This means that food security has become one of the most fundamental strategic aspects on the global agenda. We can see this in the G20 taking place in Brazil, where Brazil is promoting a global alliance against hunger, because clearly there will be no peace without food security, and there will be no food security without peace. Therefore, and regardless of where we are in terms of the government, by belonging or aligning with one of these Norths, there are agro-bio-industrial opportunities that are extraordinary. And based on the understanding of this need to preserve the associated agendas in this non-hegemonic order, Argentina can fully leverage them. I believe that another consequence of the non-hegemonic order is the weakening of multilateralism, as we have been observing the World Trade Organization, for example, where the liberalization of agricultural trade is still outstanding, and the attempt of some countries to weaken or politicize science-based platforms such as the Codex Alimentarius or the Rotterdam Convention. Clearly, these are scenarios where the most important interests of the agro-bioproductive sector are at play. And of course, we will need better and more diplomatic presence of Argentina in all international forums where that production is at stake. Always in close ties and in synergy with farmers, with their associations, and the commerce and trade chambers associated to this sector. As I have already expressed, non-hegemonic order involves more room for maneuver, but more uncertainty as well. I have already referred to these uncertainties, so I will try to mention the certainties that do exist, or the opportunities, which are clearly happening as an increase in the global population, which will reach 10 billion by 2050, and the economic growth of certain regions, particularly in the Asian continent, where we expect growing demand of food. A rise is expected in the demand for food of more than 50%, and also an increase in the demand of calories of more than 60%. Argentina is one of the few countries that is in the very select group that lives with food surplus, as the rest of the countries of Mercosur and other countries such as Australia and the United States. Particularly, and in the face of the confirmation of Asia as the future economic hub of the world, by 2030 there will clearly be areas that will have a severe food deficit, and there will be greater purchasing power. So this is something that we must remember. In the last United Nations report on the state of food security, 8.1% of people living in Asia suffer from hunger. And there is 20.4% that suffers from hunger in Africa, but 8.4% in Asia means 384.5 million people in the face of 298.4 million people in Africa. Therefore, Asia continues to be a great opportunity for our international food trade. On the other hand, the European Union, with a food sector that is only 5% of their GDP, maintain policies that subsidize agriculture, generating important distortions that affect international food trade and international biofuel trade, using environmental justifications, but which in reality respond to the protectionist desires of their farmers and to maintain rurality in a global context where urbanization is on the rise. Argentina is an agro-bioindustrial producing country that has high levels of sustainability. Therefore, beyond the criticism to the unfair policies of Europe, Argentina is facing a great opportunity to maintain the sustainability of production, even overcoming the rigorous mechanisms of policies and regulations in Europe. Final part to conclude. The Africas represent this last part. Because of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, especially in the north of Africa, we have a region that is part of net importers of food, particularly wheat, sunflower, and maize. Many of the countries in Africa are not only net importers of food, but also, just as an example, we can calculate that 27 countries depend by 50% on the food consumption and depend on the import of wheat from Russia and Ukraine. Africa is very heterogeneous, and we believe that 60% of the cultivable land is placed in Africa, but with a high level of undernourishment. 42.5% of the working class dedicates to agriculture, and with a high percentage of smallholder farmers. Africa exports $43 billion worth of food, and we expect that number to double. But it is clear that agricultural production there is highly inefficient, with low productivity, and if we add internal conflicts and the consequences of climate change, it becomes very clear to see the problems that Africa has in this sense. But there's a great opportunity there as well. How will we feed the 10 billion people that will live in the world in 2050 if we do not increase food production at a worldwide level? And if that productive revolution does not take place in Africa, where will it take place? For them, it will be much necessary to transfer knowledge and technology with high-quality seeds and genetic improvements, with a better use of fertilizers and a growth in the production of phosphate. The idea here is that the scientific and technological package of Argentina and our region has a major opportunity there. and we cannot overlook this in our plans. I would like to conclude by saying the following. In a wonderful meeting with the international team of Aapresid yesterday, this group is doing an extraordinary job with stakeholders and partners who support this work. We reflected upon the role of Aapresid in the future. The future is now. And Aapresid has grown internally, and they are a reference for other countries in the region, and they have even caught the interest of FAO, with which they are developing a memorandum of understanding, because science and innovation at FAO cannot ignore what Aapresid is doing. Aapresid appears as one of the most inclusive and successful platforms representing farmers and facilitating the process of ownership of farmers of the most relevant technologies in agriculture, and to think of agriculture holistically and within food systems. Aapresid, in my view, represents the biggest platform to share the scientific and technological package of Argentina, which together with Brazil, Uruguay, and Paraguay are showing that there are solutions from the global south to all the challenges of food security. We have regions such as Africa that need us, and we will have to think strategically how to tackle such a challenge. It is clear that Aapresid is not enough, and its partners and all of its network at a regional level are necessary. But if we build this with the association with ICA, for example, we can scale up for sure. Yesterday, in some of the discussions, we heard very valuable contributions, which reminded us of all the shortcomings that exist in our productive chain. But dear friends, everything is connected, and the imperative of growing for Aapresid is inevitable, and at the same time, we cannot disregard the internal dynamics. Aapresid must not bear the sole responsibility when the public sector must become involved. Currently, it is essential to raise our voices to remind people of two things. No agri-food system will be successful if it is not based in the public-private synergy, as Manuel was expressing. And both players are essential, each one in their role. Sometimes guidelines will come from the public sector, but sometimes they must come from the private sector as well. It is part of this dynamic. And the other issue is the role of Argentine diplomacy. We must strengthen their role in all international negotiations where the agro-bioproductive interests of our country are at stake, defending our interests and doing so proactively to show the solutions that we can offer. We must be fully convinced that the interests that we are defending, both at the FAO, at the WTO, or any association within the framework of geopolitics, we either sit at the table with big players, or if not, we will be on the menu, like I mentioned yesterday, and I mention it again. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, Carlos.
Thank you very much, Carlos. I would like to synthesize or summarize with a couple of phrases the need to rethink national strategies in terms of agricultural development in a world that is in the midst of a reconstruction in this new geopolitical context, the importance of Aapresid and the organizations in the sector, and the role of diplomacy to face these new challenges in this changing world. Thank you very much to the four guest here, and I'm going to open the floor for questions to the four panelists. We are receiving the questions. If you have a comment or a question you would like to ask, we will open the floor for 10 minutes of debate.
No me llegó ninguna.
I didn't receive anything. They said, especially Marcelo, as responsible for this event, that the this who ask the best question will get an Amarok with them, or 4 Amaroks. So if you're interested in any of these trucks, if you want, I can ask a question myself. Let's see. This goes for the 3 of you. I agree with a smaller state that release the potential of the individual, that has more freedom and that has clear pathways. That is a problem in Argentina that Brazil and Paraguay does not have. You see Brazil, all this, you see their pathway goes a bit to the right or a little bit closer. The variation is minimal. Here we change 180 degrees with every administration. What do you think the public-private relationships should be to help people prioritize in their individual lives? For example, the Foreign Office. We have had very good meetings with this ministry. There's an opportunity in Africa, for example, in Europe. We can put knowledge and biofuels available to them. What should be the role of the state? Because as Carlos said, with Marielene, who's the international manager, we attended many COPs, and we have visited European producers in France, Ireland, Italy, and there are many working opportunities there. But it's going to be much more efficient if we can align ourselves with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. How do you see the role of the state and that public-private interaction to make the most of this, to seize the opportunities we have in the world? Of course, we understand that we have to think of the macroeconomics, and we understand that priority. But going a bit to the shorter and the longer term, that everything is connected, how do you see this? You have to settle the macroeconomics, and we are on the right path. But how do you see what should be the strategy and the role of the public-private sector to seize this opportunity at global level? That goes for the 3 of you. The 3 of you could answer. I think there's something important to happen December the 10th, or the election day. That is a cultural change of a big part of a society. They were looking for a smaller state focused on more strategic visions to create the general conditions so that industry, the mining sector, the farming sector can grow and release our potential. I think that that foundation that started being built, I think that cultural changes are complex. I'm not a sociologist. Perhaps, Marcelo, you could help me out here. But I think that these changes should not be underestimated. And this is helping to hold and to uphold these macroeconomic changes and the role of the state, which is a basic condition. And this is paramount. Going a bit further into the role of the state, in this case, the Secretary of Agriculture, we are moving towards a much more bidirectional role. As you know, we welcome thousands of chambers of commerce, officers, and we interact with different interests and lobbyists. And in that interaction process, in many cases, that cultural change is there, and the idea is to be with this, to come with a proposal. The swine producer should propose a strategic plan. The industry should have a 2030 strategic plan. Beef industry should have its strategic plan. So to work on those strategic agreements throughout the supply chain. So when we welcome or when we receive a chamber, we work on those proposals so as to see how from the state we can enhance or improve the measures. The state should establish certain quotas and growing or seeding strategy and crop orientation, and that has been very damaging for the private sector. So to have a state to help enhance all of that, of course, with regulations and certain guidelines, with a focus on certain smallholders, I think this is the way to go. Many have seen this landscape. In some cases, this was not the case. We continue receiving many with their demands, the list of demands and the list of subsidies they require that has led to this economic decadence. And part of our work is to teach and to promote this cultural paradigm or cultural shift, a cultural change that happened in the ballot, but this is something that we should see also in the industry in general to move forward and to leave failed model behind. We are receiving a flood of questions for you all. I would like to begin with Carlos. There are many questions on this regarding the opportunities for Argentina in the face of new environmental traceability demands of the European Union for Argentine products. What are the opportunities there? How can we confront those guidelines?
Una pregunta clave, es un tema.
It's a key question. As Manuel just said, there has been a CAS meeting, the Agricultural Council of the South, whereby the most important southern countries have met, not for the first time, but there is a dynamic, there's a construction whereby there's a concern, there's a reflection on this matter. As you might know, these regulations should start working as of January 1st, 2025, and this implies, and let me share with you that I've had many conversations with different stakeholders related to agriculture in Europe, and they are highly concerned about these new regulations. These are decisions that are taken in Brussels, but when you talk with producers and even importers, they don't have the slightest ideas how this could be implemented in terms of daily lives. In fact, many importers have halted many purchases because they do not know about the consequences of this dynamic. I mean, they are in the midst of a great confusion of implementations. Having said this, there's a general consensus at regional level to request for the delay of the implementation of these policies. But I think this is the formal process. In the real economy process, Argentina is one of the countries that probably has the most possibilities to show its adaptation capacity to these restrictions. Let me give you an interesting example. I had to accompany some chamber representatives, Argentine chamber representatives, at the meetings they have held at FAO and with other representatives from European countries in Rome when I was a permanent representative there. There, somehow, we showed a model that Argentina is carrying out, that some members of the private sectors are carrying out to show how the capacity to show that the capacity of traceability can be shown in terms of deforestation, beef, leather. Correct me if I'm wrong, Manuel, and soybean. When these presentations, when I see Brazil did this presentation in FAO where we went together, I want to say that the level, the degree of surprise on the part of the leaders of food FAO in what Argentina has achieved in terms of mechanisms or the structure to show traceability, the scientific rigorousness and the seriousness of the task carried out, their surprise was a meeting because we wanted them to tell us how to adapt to the European regulations. But we repurposed the meeting. We need your experience, they said, because we are thinking of models to put at the country's disposal what you are doing. You are a step ahead. You are ahead of many countries. Sometimes we criticize ourselves, but we have many opportunities to show. As long as we are able to shed light on this capacity of being productive so that our production can be sustainable and can have not only economic, social, and environmental possibilities, but we do this with conviction because producers are convinced, because there's work that has been carried out for many years in the private sector with very positive synergies, to go back to the prior question, with the technical department of the state, because INTA had a key role, or the SENASA was key in many of the questions. You cannot speak of food security without SENASA, without the role the INTA has played. So I think that Argentina has a lot of opportunities, but not because we do this out of goodwill. It's obvious that politics should seduce us to convince that we are on the right path and that we have the right opportunities. I see this from what I've heard abroad at the surprise of what we are doing. So we have huge opportunities, but we have to work seriously on these synergies and to be sophisticated. The world is complex. It's not just to think in a rigid manner, but you have to think out of the box, because there are opportunities, but you should know how to read the room and to operate in consequence. I have 15 questions regarding railroads. So there's a lot of interest in this regard. One of the questions says, how can we carry out this railway network without a direct intervention of the state in terms of investment? And how can we move forward without union blockage? And how can we move forward with this idea? The first thing, and that's why we talked about this, is with an international agreement. International agreements are part of our constitution, and that is a sovereign feature. And we should start off, as we have always done, talking with the different chambers, the colleagues from different countries, the commission from the international ministries. I started to talk with different ambassadors, and we should have to start planting the seed of this idea. That's the way we should go until they take root. The first question is simple. When business is good, there's money always appears, never mind who invests in it. But if we provide the institutional network for those investments to appear, especially in the first corridor, that is in the Capricorn Axe, the first thing we need to put a railroad in motion is the cargo. Paraguay has the cargo available today, and you give the proposal that they are going to save 30 days of shipping, going through the Panama Channel. If they have to go through the Panama Channel, there's 65 days of shipping. If they go through Antofagasta, Mejillones, it's 35 days of cargo. And you don't have to use ship that is designed for the canal, but you have to use a smaller ship because you can move from deep waters, harbors, to shallower ports. So there's a shortening of time frames, and all of that brings about a more return on investment, a fast return on investment. I can reach 30 days earlier, and the cost of the shipping is 30% less with these roads or railroads we have to develop. But as I said before, this happens with the change of the world, where it is produced and where it is consumed. And I always say, Las Lomitas in Formosa is closer to Shanghai than Pergamino in the province of Buenos Aires. Thank you, Francisco. Manuel, I have many questions for you. I'll try to summarize them in one. How do you see the role of the state, especially from the Secretary of Agriculture, to promote the productive diversification, especially support the interior of our provinces? What are the public policies you are thinking in order to sustain competitiveness, but also to support the interior of our country? Sometimes we go back to the beginning. With the macroeconomy in order, any town, city of the interior of our country will develop faster and better. Internally, at the Secretary, there is a work we have been carrying out since the beginning of our administration in December to simplify, avoid the red tape, making producers' life simpler. This is key. It seems a minor issue, but when we have distortive taxes and we have more complex issues than that, to go from 5 presentations of CISA to 2, eliminating 3, is a simplification that is of real aid. If banks give credits to producers and industries and not to the state, is a tool that helps dynamize the production. There is a biotechnology area, an industry area within the Secretary that is focused on broadening those opportunities for crops, adding of value, adding of technology, and the approval of biotechnological events, and many more complex issues. And our focus is to speed up those processes, especially taking into account the productive cycles of the different seasons, growing seasons, focusing on that. Clearly, biofuels are an area that require development and enhancement. As Francisco was saying before, if we double our productive capacity, we have to ship that. But if we double that, we also need to transform it somehow. Because, as you all know, 70% of our corn goes abroad, and it should be turned also into biofuels, bioplastics, or animal feed. And so we have to think of that. So trying to sum up, Marcelo, we have to give the rules of the game to the producer and the necessary funds to do it. But the good news is that financing is something that we have achieved at very attractive rates for agricultural producers, for farmers, and it's a time to make the most of as macroeconomics starts settling and ordering the problems we are used to in the latest year.
En honor al tiempo.
Okay, because of time, we will close the session. I would like to thank the 4 panelists, and we would like to apologize because we have really a cascade of questions, many related to the comments made by our colleagues. But just to respect the limited time that we have, I just would like to share some reflections about the future. Some of the colleagues have discussed opportunities, and they've also expressed in some of the questions that I haven't been able to read, is how to think about the future of Argentina, what the role of Aapresid can be. And there we can kind of mark the topics there, because Aapresid wishes to help the government and the different organizations of the sector to have a more prospective outlook and a more strategic view of Argentina for the future, taking into consideration this ever-changing world in geopolitical terms. So, as a final reflection, the need that we have from the public and private sector organizations, and especially the farmers' associations such as Aapresid, with a very strong capacity to think in terms of innovation, in prospective terms, to think about the future of Argentina and the future of agriculture. So in that sense, I think there are many questions that have been presented today. How can Aapresid collaborate in a more prospective manner? And how can they generate spaces for debate where we can think of an agriculture and rural Argentina in the future? And this big challenge, right? Thank you very much. Very good question. Aapresid is an organization mainly made up of Argentinians with everything that is involved. And Argentine producers and Argentine farmers are extremely resilient because of issues that we will not list now. They know of economy, of agriculture, they know of business administration, management, etc. So I think that produces very innovative farmers that have a collaborative mind. They know what they're doing. They're very efficient. And also, we have a trend to think of Argentinians in a dichotomy. No, it's the local agenda. It's the leaf hopper now. Now that's the main topic. And that happens, as well. So I think that the first issue to understand is that the world has changed. It is no longer possible to work in isolation, and it would be a great risk for the institution to be completely foreign to all of these changes that are occurring at a global level. And of course, we have the other side of the coin, which is that we may be thinking of the future and of global issues, and we're failing to respond to the needs of producers here. So that's a little bit the labor that we're in. But I think we can try to make our agendas more compatible. I also think that the great power of our institution is that farmers are involved in innovation processes. I was in Europe recently, but speaking with farmers from the different countries that I mentioned, I do not need to explain to a farmer in France how to evolve their productive system. But what I can tell them is what we did in Argentina, what the attributes are that we believe will provide a stronger agricultural response as well as an environmental response. We can convey our know-how, our knowledge of how they can integrate into regional groups, how they can put together groups for research and development, identifying key moments, working with science and technology in real scenarios. I think that's our mission, and I think that that has a very strong impact, and that's what we need to do. But what you said here is key. It's very good to go with proposals, to go with a strategy, And that's what we do, because at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we've had very good meetings where we spoke about this, and even the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has pointed out some countries in Africa or Eastern Europe where there may be possibilities of going with this interactive model, this proposal, and also with no-till planters. We are working with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and with the different secretariats, including agriculture, and then value adding, because we may think of strategies, but we have very concrete things. Biofuels for aviation. I know that in 2025, any airplane that flies into Europe will need to have 10% of biofuels, but they get here with the empty tank to the end of the world where we are. They need to refuel, so we will need to respond to that need. I think we need to guide the innovation ecosystem in Argentina and align it with the needs of the world. And I agree. I will not go to the state to ask for subsidies or to ask for solutions, but to maybe think together, engage in dialogue, and identify opportunities, the ones that they see and the ones we see. Is it safe to invest in Brazil, where there's no institutional security and then you cannot transfer money and the land tenure is complicated? So we need to identify the countries where we can go. Some farmers are producing abroad because Argentina is too small, and it's happening with Uruguay. There are also Argentine farmers growing in Africa and even in Europe and the United States. Why? Because the push and the drive and the youth of Argentine agriculture would allow us to disembark with full production chains abroad. Aapresid also needs to deal with that, but also needs to deal with the leafhopper. So that's a challenge for the institution, and how to have high-quality conversations and how to have good discussions between public and private sector.
Tenemos que darle un upgrade de
We have to upgrade as well many things, because we're coming to these forums, these summits, with a good conversation, but we must have a common message with the region, with Brazil, Uruguay, and Paraguay, and Chile. And we must have a public-private partnership to capture these possibilities. I think this is what's coming in the next years. And the sale of ecosystem services. Because everything we do, carbon capture, all of this has to affect the price of grains. So an environmental certificate, now we need to sell them for other companies to offset carbon. I mean, it's something that has been discussed since the beginning of time. And the sale of ecosystem services, not just in terms of grain or energy, is something that we need to focus on. And we need to consolidate this perspective. And I think this could be a way forward. Thank you, Marcelo. Some key ideas that we were left with in these days and in this roundtable: a changing world, a complex world with a new geopolitical reality. The need, the urge to organize and create the basic conditions to build a future, the need to create strategic infrastructures to mobilize our resources, as well as a greater capacity for innovation, greater dialogue capacity between public and private entities and between technical and political institutions. I think that, like the motto says, everything is connected. And this is where we are writing the future of agriculture. So we hope that this roundtable has helped you to reflect upon that future that we want to write together for the good of Argentina and for the development of our territories. Thank you very much to everyone.